Proportional Response, Book 1, Chapter 13, Part 8, Striking a Regal Pose. Vashna smiled up at Hannibal and felt his hand warm in another blush as he smiled down at her after he recovered from her admission that she had considered pinning him against a wall and not taking no for an answer. An answering blush travelled up her arm, and she answered his half-smile with her best, mischievous grin. "Oh, I so want to just drag him back to one of our rooms and have my way with him, but I have promises to keep, and I think we should take it a little slower than that." She sighed inwardly and spoke. "I have to confess, the pinning you against the wall would have been fun, but would have made the conversations that need to happen a bit more awkward. For now, my dear man." Why did saying that send another shock through me? Did he feel an answering shock? Later, princess, matter at hand. "I think you and I need to have a talk with your bond brother here. I considered asking you to let me talk to him alone, but I think, given the ringer he just put you through, it might be better to have you here for this." She stepped into the office, pulling Hannibal with her, shut the doors, and, with more reluctance than she wanted to admit, let go of his hand. After all, turnabout is fair play. She turned to regard Henry with a cool gaze, turning on every bit of training she'd received in dealing with people. She'd need it for this. Henry looked back at her with one eyebrow raised and a slightly amused expression on his face. "Turnabout, huh? And just what are we turning about today, little lady? I would think you'd want to take your winnies today and pull them into a quiet corner to talk." She ruthlessly kept her hands from blushing. It took every bit of concentration she had for a moment, which she covered with a smile. "Oh, playing coy? Are we now? I think you have an idea what I am here for, my good man." Henry cocked his head at her and furrowed his brows. "I am afraid I really don't, Vashna. I mean, I'm pleased as punch that you are going to take my friend here and see to him for a while, if that is what you mean. I know there are a lot of layered social niceties that can come about with bond siblings and other close relationships, and I will confess I don't understand the details on so much as the half of it, but I'm trying to." He held up a hand as she felt her face darken. He would make that commitment without knowing. He continued. "I mean, I understand the general idea, and the 1,000-foot view, and that the base idea is that you always have each other's backs, even more so than a spouse would be expected to sometimes, but there are so many particulars, and I must confess, ignorance on some of them. So, I will just flat out ask, is there something here where I'm supposed to give approval, or make inquiries about your intentions? Or what, I assume?" "This is going the wrong direction," she cut him off with a chopping of the hand. "You have played one role of the bond brother admirably, beating sense into the thick head of your bond brother. The kind of things he needed to hear, he could only take from you or, possibly, his father, or, well, maybe a male natural relative or his mother. Such things are complicated." She shook her head. "Now I am getting off track." "No, friend. This has to do with something completely different. I understand you have arranged to have a private meal with my mentor in the next few days. I will tell you that the relationship between mentor and mentored among my people in situations like this can be very complicated and carries some shades that don't exist as much in most of your cultures. One of my principal roles as her mentor is to watch her back, as you humans so elegantly put it, particularly in social situations. So, I must ask you." She drew herself up to her second most regal pose, the one that her mother had made her practice for hours on end, and she swore she'd never use it. So much for that. She stood there in the pose for a moment, deliberately looking down her nose at the human, and put a little gravitas into her voice. "What exactly are your intentions towards my mentor?" Henry's eyebrows shot up, and he leaned back in his chair, a slightly baffled look on his face. "Is that what this is about?" He turned to look at Hannibal, his hands raised slightly. "I have nothing but respect for your aunt, Hannibal. I think you know that. It is not like I don't regularly have private meals with ambassadors and their staff members, and she seems to want to get a chance to interview me again, so I figured it would be a good idea. She could see Annabel out of the corner of her eye. He seemed to have sensed where she was going, and hid his amusement at his brother's discomfort well. "Oh, you sly boy. You and I may get along famously after all." Henry turned his gaze from his brother's carefully masked face and back to her before he continued. "I assure you, I have no intentions towards her at all." She let her lip twitch in annoyance. "Here goes." She took a moment to draw herself up to her most regal and disdainful pose, held it for a moment more to let the tension sink in, and spoke with all of the imperial might in her voice that she'd ever learned to use. "Why the hell's not?